In a world where screens dominate our interactions, where emojis replace genuine expressions, and where instant messaging supersedes face to face conversations and connection, it has become more crucial than ever to recognise the power and the significance of dialogue. Open and honest conversations are the bloodline of human connection. They foster understanding, empathy, and the exchange of ideas. But how can we cultivate an environment that encourages genuine and meaningful conversations? And why does it matter? In this episode, we're going to explore the barriers that hinder honesty and vulnerability and discover how we can cultivate an environment that encourages genuine and meaningful conversations. So if you're curious about the impact of honest conversations, whether you're a seasoned conversationalist or simply someone who's eager to dive deeper into the art of dialogue, I hope you stick around for this thought-provoking conversation that may challenge your perspectives, inspire your curiosity, and may even foster a deeper appreciation for the art of conversation that's honest and open. You're listening to Wellthy Living Conversations. I'm Lisa, your host and founder of Wellthy Living and fellow conversation enthusiast. It is here that I connect with a variety of wonderful people to have inspiring, insightful, and curious conversations to help you live a meaningful, connected, and well life, both personally and professionally. So grateful to have a guest today to delve into this topic, and that is a psychologist, an executive coach, and author of True Perspective, Joe Hart. Joe's a curious and insightful man who helps people identify the truth so they can stop wasting time, start taking action, and achieve results. So welcome, Joe.
Thank you so much. And what an intro.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you liked it.
Indeed.
So let's tell everyone a little bit more about you. So after graduating with a Master of Organisational Psychology, Joe has spent 7 years working with Gallup, a global leader in engagement and strengths-based development. He became a strength-based coach, engagement expert, and worked with senior leaders all over Asia. He went on to spend a few years working with Chandler Macleod, leading the client services team, running culture change programs, executive coaching, and psychometric assessment for selection and development. Most recently, he was the culture lead and internal executive coach, supporting people at all levels of seniority. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show here today.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Yes. So let's get into this conversation about conversations. So
love it.
When I was looking at your website and reading about you, you described yourself as an expert conversationalist.
I did.
I want to know what that means. We want to know what.
Well, I would love someone to explain it to me, actually. Yeah, I just thought it sounded cool. But why did I describe myself in that way? I would say what makes me an expert conversationalist is the fact that I just love having conversations. And there's nothing more pleasing to me than being able to communicate with somebody genuinely, honestly, at any level, at any walk of life. I just find it fascinating. And so for me, it's that curiosity and it's that idea that, I just want to understand. I just want to get to know and be close with somebody, intimate with somebody in that conversation is what I think deems me an expert in it, because I just want to keep doing it. And the more you do something, the better you get. I would hope.
Yeah. Brilliant. So what's the most important quality of a good conversation?
Flow. Yeah. For it to be flow, in flow and for it to be two-way. A nice balance of listening and speaking. The content, I think, is also important in that it's genuine and it is not It's not sort of merely superficial and scratching the surface. For example, some conversations feel like they're polite, and they sort of gloss over what's really being said. The type of conversation you might have while you're waiting to dive into an interview. So picture sitting there with one panelist, say, and it's just this slightly awkward, superficial conversation, small talky type thing. I don't think that's a conversation. That is us filling time. You could make it a conversation, but often I think, it turns into just filling time, filling space. And I'd say that's not great.
Yeah. So when you talked about conversation a lot in your book, which is this wonderful book here, you talked a lot about truth and how being honest is so necessary in order to have conversations that matter, conversations that provide impact, conversations that allow for both people to be fully seen and heard and understood. But it's not so easy to have truthful and honest conversations, even though it might sound like it's easy. So what does it mean? What does it really mean to lead with truth?
No, I'm still figuring it out, if I could be completely honest. And, obviously I wrote a book about it, but doesn't mean I know all the answers.
Yeah.
And so I guess where I'm at with that question right now, as we sit in this conversation, it's about aligning the intention that I have with the experience that people are having of me. And to me, we talk about authentic leadership, or I'm leading in my truth, for example. And some people roll their eyes at that type of or lived experience. For me, all of that, for it to be truly authentic, it's the reflection that comes back to you is quite close, like hand in glove, to the intention that you're delivering.
Okay.
Yeah, if that makes sense.
So the reflection that you're receiving from the other person?
Yeah. So their experience of you is very closely aligned with how you're intending to be experienced. So what you mean to say is what they hear.
Yeah. And do you feel that clarifying that within a conversation makes it a better conversation?
Sometimes, yeah. I think if you have to ask, it means you're not sure. But if someone's a great listener, they'd be voluntarily providing that feedback to you in that moment. And then you can choose to clarify or challenge or elaborate or whatever it might be off the back of that reflection. So that opportunity to really go deeper, so you understand, so they understand, so we understand, I think is the opportunity that we're both looking for. Yeah. Sort of like this conversation right now.
Yeah.
You're asking me, I'm reflecting, you're then challenging or reflecting back. And
I love it that we are playing out the topic.
Indeed.
So the reason that I asked that then is because you said that your intention or what you say is what you want others to hear, and that they match and align. And I suppose without clarifying that with the person and asking them, or even the person who's hearing said, let me see if I heard that right, and then repeating it back to them as the reflection, which I suppose is that active listening model. But if without that, there can be a whole lot of assumptions. Like I could assume you're hearing what I'm saying, because why would I think any differently unless you said something that sounded completely irrelevant.
Yeah. And yes, so 100%, if we're in a conversation and I say something and you don't look clear, you may not say I'm confused, and it happens all the time, say in a work context. somebody, might say something to their boss, and, or their boss might say something to them, is probably a better example. They don't say anything, and then 5 minutes they walk out of the room, they turn to their colleague and say, did they just ask me to do X? And it's like, well, why didn't you clarify it? Why didn't you ask them in the moment if you weren't clear? So you would hope that manager would be able to pick up on the fact that maybe this person didn't quite understand, or no, hey, I just want to hear it from you. Can you just play back what I've shared with you? Can you just let me know that you're clear? Like, what are you going to go do now? Or what is it that we're aiming to achieve? Just so, not to be patronizing, but so we can align. And so I can be clear that you're clear, and you're clear that I'm clear, and we're clear.
And then we're all clear.
We're all clear.
But I think that, I know it sounds a bit, like, we need to really do that. And, you even mentioned it could sound patronizing. But I think that that's something that maybe people have created a story that's patronizing, or that means that we haven't communicated well or whatever. But I would think that gaining clarity is a fantastic skill within communication that avoids conflict.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, my days at Gallup, if you're familiar with the Q12, the first statement, which accounts for the majority of employee engagement, and that you're asked to agree with or disagree with, is, I know what's expected of me at work.
Yeah.
Now, the same model can be applied in a relationship. I know what's expected of me in this relationship.
Yeah.
And and I've used that before, where I've asked someone to say, well, think about this in your personal life, and ask yourself those same 12 questions, or in your sort of intimate relationship, with your partner, ask yourself those same questions, but rather than the organization or supervisor, translate that into partner or friend or colleague. And it's a really powerful exercise. And I know what's expected of me in this relationship is a really powerful frame, I believe, because often the answer is an assumption.
Yeah.
It's like, yes. And it's like, okay, great. Let's turn to your partner. What do you expect from them? And if the answer is different, it's like, oh, whoa, hang on. I'm not sure that last little bit was what I signed up for. Yeah. So that's a really beautiful conversation to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's often missed. And when you were just saying that, and I haven't written this in my notes for talking about this with you today, but it seems pretty valid, is that having those clear expectations and those clear agreements that come from, I suppose, said expectations or shared expectations and agreements made, is really the core foundation of having a good relationship, whether it be personal or professional. Now, those agreements can be formal or they could be informal, but a conversation has been had nevertheless. But prior to that, and you do talk a lot about self-awareness in the book, and I did want to talk about self-awareness today, but a part of that, in order to get to the place of agreements so that everything else flows within the relationship, including the conversations and the conversation around agreements, each individual needs to take responsibility to understand their values and then their needs. Because sometimes maybe the expectations aren't really just based on what society has taught us, or what our upbringing has taught us, or what we're told is meant to be in a relationship or not, or in a work relationship or not, but they're not necessarily aligned with what our personal needs are. And then we have to understand what our personal values are.
Yes.
So that's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It's a lifelong piece of work, that one. Yeah. It's forever work.
And forever changing, which then so does the possibility for agreements and the conversations that happen with agreements, like when you want to change them. So how do they go? Like, we've got agreements, we're going on this path, but things have changed. But how do you, if you don't say that it's changed for you, or your values have changed, or your needs have changed, and you're
Yeah.
just expecting the other person to know, that can ruin what you described in the beginning of the most important thing, which was flow.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
so how does somebody have the courage or the confidence to revisit those agreements or expectations?
Well, I mean, an honest conversation follows being honest with yourself.
Mm.
So, if I want to be honest, like, and this is an example of, say, someone say, I'm going to tell somebody what they need to hear. I'm going to be really honest with them. Right. And so that could be personal, it could be work, could be whatever it is. And it sounds a little bit angry. It sounds a little bit, it's got a barb with it. It's a confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
That's not necessarily an honest conversation, in my opinion.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
An honest conversation starts with, hang on, what's really going on here for me? What's most important to me? What is it that I need to share?
Mm.
You talked about values and purpose.
Mm.
If that's coming from me, right, there's a lot more responsibility that flows following that conversation you've had with yourself.
Mm.
And I'd argue that when we're feeling some sort of distress and tension and misalignment, let's call it, that's coming from an internal place of you not wanting to go in that to that dark spot or whatever it is. You don't want to unveil whatever it is that's troubling you. And so it's easier to tell somebody else what they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's much easier. So yeah, self-awareness, I think, is absolutely the starting point, because most of the answers to the challenges you're experiencing are actually right in front of you, right within you.
Yeah. I love that clarification of honest conversation, because, that idea of just raw, unfiltered language or dialogue is, a person can justify by saying, I'm just being honest. I'm just saying how I feel. You want truth. I'm giving you truth.
Yeah. You
And
can't handle the truth.
you can't handle the truth. Exactly, right?
Yeah.
But it's great, that clarification in there of that step before, because is that really your truth, or is that your masked truth?
Yeah.
So that idea of that step behind, where you have to be really genuinely honest with yourself,
Yeah.
and be willing to go there before necessarily allowing just unfiltered honesty with what you believe is your honesty, or you believe is truth. In those moments, that's really good to clarify that. And I think a lot of it, again, it's not easy, and people are going to make mistakes. And I think that's the wonderful thing about transparency and vulnerability and honesty is, or the vulnerability part is that, it's okay to make the mistake, but reflect on that mistake.
Well, and there's something I'll share something now that it's a live example for me, and it just sort of brings this whole conversation together, because maybe some people are going, huh, what are they talking about? I don't get it. And because it is sort of complicated, right?
Yeah.
But the first sort of, let's call it an assumption, but I think most people would agree, is most of the time we live inside our head based on the conversations we're having with ourselves and the stories, or whatever you call it, we're just interpreting the world, and that is sense making, meaning making, whatever you want to label it. We all do it. It's natural, it's human, and it's how we survive, right, and navigate. So often when we're having a problem or a challenge, or we're feeling a little bit misunderstood or whatever, it's that interpretation that's racing through our head. So a live example for me was I was engaging in some contract work that I wasn't necessarily feeling really good about. So that was an internal conversation. I was doing the work, and I was like, not really feeling this. Do I really want to be doing this? Is this something I really enjoy? Could I be doing something better with my time? Oh, maybe the money's going to justify my decision here. Oh, now it's challenging my values, and a big conversation. And I'm sure most people have had something similar in their world at some point. And if they haven't, then they will. So when somebody asked me, oh, how are you enjoying this work? How are you enjoying this project? I would say, oh, yeah, it's good. Bullshit. Bullshit. And that's what I would say inside my head. It's like, you liar. Why are you lying? Because you're not. But I wasn't ready to have the conversation with that person in that moment to say, yeah, actually, I'm really not enjoying this. And I'm really not sure this is for me. And I'm not sure I'm going to continue doing this type of work because something just doesn't feel right. Someone said, well, why not? Because isn't that your thing? Aren't you the truth guy? Don't you be honest all the time? So, well, I wasn't sure what was going on. So anyway, my justification was, well, I haven't done a lot of this particular type of work much. So I need to give myself more of an opportunity, more of a runway to really understand. So, you could argue that that's just buying time, justification. I made a commitment, didn't want to go back on it, whatever. Other people were like, just get rid of it. Just don't do that type of work. That's, why are you wasting your time? Anyway, it came to a sort of opportunity where, the sponsor for this work pulled me aside and said, hey, I just want to check in, how you going? And I had the conversation. I was like, yeah, you know what? I just don't think this is working out for me. I'm not enjoying this. Oh, yeah, okay. We had the conversation. Yep, cool. Totally understand. Good. What do you want to do? Oh, look, I'll, honor my commitment and get this work done. But, from X date onward, yeah, please, I'm not going to do this anymore. That conversation changed everything for me. Because the conversation I was having internally was no longer, why am I doing this? What's this all about? Do I really like this? Do I not? And funnily enough, what it did is it changed my response to the actual work. So I could engage more deeply with the work and weirdly started to enjoy and appreciate the work more.
Yeah. Powerful.
Weird.
Powerful. Yeah.
Weird because, it and that's the thing, like you can never know what's going to happen post an honest conversation.
Yeah.
And what holds us back is the fear.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody's going to judge me. Somebody's going to think I'm not honoring my commitment. Somebody's going to think I'm lazy. They were all the things that were going through my head. Somebody's going to think that I'm not capable, or that I just want to go for money rather than, all of this stuff. None of it matters because it's not true. And if someone says, yeah, but it is because I know someone who did the same thing and that's what everyone said about them. It's like, yeah, but you can't possibly know that that's true for you in this case because it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. And that's part of anxiety, isn't it? That we create all these things about the possibilities of what could happen, often the worst case scenario with anxiety, rather than know that it's not a fact.
Yeah. And you know what? On the flip side, the sponsor, put yourself in the sponsor's shoes. You'd much rather have the conversation with someone like me about how I'm feeling and not fully connecting, potentially even give me some strategies and ideas about how I connect to it, or some options. Say, oh, well, if you don't want to do it, that's all good. And then all of a sudden, I've got choice and agency back in my world.
And
I'm choosing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's empowering. It's empowering. And it's interesting that you then went on to enjoy the work, and maybe it was that once the amount of energy it takes when you're not feeling aligned, when you're holding on to feelings and the fear of sharing them, it takes so much energy and it zaps you so much that you don't necessarily have the almost not giving yourself permission or the energy to really just be present in what you're doing, which would be more enjoyable, and you'd have more energy and better mood that would go toward what you were doing. But when you're holding on to something that doesn't feel right, you haven't told anyone and you haven't workshopped it because you're scared, then it really does limit your ability.
Does so much. So clearly I'm not an expert in honest conversations because I'm still grappling with it.
I beg to say that I don't think that in most areas there's any such thing as an expert. I think that things change all the time. New information comes out. We're forever learning. So we could be an expert in learning about conversations and practicing conversations.
Yes.
I like the term anyway. It sounds great.
Absolutely. I mean, equally, we're all experts in something.
I won't rob you off that.
We're all experts in something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going on from that then, about that situation, it brings to mind a term that is thrown around really easily these days, especially in organisations, and that's psychological safety. This incredible buzzword, which in itself has great meaning. I don't think a lot of people really know what it means in action. I think a lot of people know what it means on paper and through definition. But actually creating a safe space to have open and honest conversations is not necessarily easy. And you've got to understand empathy. You've got to understand trust. You've got to understand active listening. So in your experience working with so many different organisations, having conversations with so many different people, in your personal life, as a psychologist, all of those things, where do we sit with this safe space place?
I know you want the truth.
I want your opinion.
Version on my perspective. Yeah. I have not seen too many teams or organizations or units, let's call them, even family units, where psychological safety outweighs the fear. So basically, I think we do pretty poorly on the psychological safety front. I think where I've seen and experienced it the most is in one-on-one conversations. Yeah, and there's an obvious reason for that. There's just less variables to manage.
Yes.
But at an organizational level, at an executive team level, at a division level, I think it's hard to come by. So for an organization to say we are really safe, we promote psychological safety, we action it, we pride ourselves on it. It's a really difficult one. It's a really difficult one. I think it varies, because you could nail it one day and completely balls it up the next.
So what attributes does it take to nail it more regularly than stuff it up more regularly?
Well, so a really good litmus test that I use when I'm trying to determine, okay, that they've claimed they're highly supportive of psychological safety, and it's a buzzword, and yes, that's what they do, is what's the proportion of speaking to listening that comes from the leader?
Mhm.
The leader's doing more of the talking and less of the listening.
Yeah.
Like straight up. There's so many different reasons why they might be doing more of the speaking than the listening. None of them are aligned with psychological safety.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
that's, I think, the simplest observable data you can gather to test whether psychological safety exists in the organization. Because the whole idea of psychological safety is enabling people to speak up. Now, if they're talking, then people just can't.
Mm.
You just can't. Otherwise, you'd be speaking over somebody. So that is I think, the best, simplest way to examine and determine, do you have psychological safety in your team? And if someone says, yeah, and let me tell you all the reasons why, I'm like, okay, yeah, good. Yeah, nice. Sounds like you've got it all sorted then.
Yeah. So when you say that the most common place that you have experienced being psychologically safe is
Mm,
one-on-one conversation,
mm.
would you be referring more to in a coaching setting so that that person has intentionally engaged you in that one-on-one session, or are you
Oh,
talking just
mm,
in your personal life, in
mm, mm.
relationships, in
Yep. It's so in general. So yes, in coaching, I would hope that I can establish a safe environment and a safe space for my clients. If not, then I don't believe I'm a very good coach. Um, if they're feeling threatened and not able to be open and challenge and speak up, then that's a problem. And sometimes that does happen for a number of reasons. Maybe they're intimidated, or how it's been set up is, it feels like an evaluative process. And so I work hard on clearing all of that, and going straight to, if I sense that they're not comfortable, like getting all of that out of the way very early on. When it comes to my experience, one-on-one, people are different.
mm,
So if you speak with a leader and it's your leader in a group, in a team setting, there's generally a bit more posturing that occurs. One-on-one, they'll drop some of the facade, and they go, oh, yeah, let's just speak a little bit more loosely and openly. They just drop the guard. So I'd say one-on-one interactions are easier for people to process, because there's less noise. And by noise, I don't just mean audible noise, I mean stimulation. And when there's too many variables bouncing around the room, they're fixated on what's happening around them, and they're trying to figure it all out, and it's overwhelming. And notwithstanding the fact that the response that they're having to all of that overwhelming information is internal, and that's the noisiest of all, but their reactions internal in that moment are stealing their attention and stealing their capacity to be present and honest
mm,
with themselves and the person that they're engaging with. So I think that's just a basic interaction dynamic. So a facilitation, you would know, if you ask people to have a conversation as a presenter or as a facilitator, and you ask the room, you'll get no one responding. Maybe one brave person, maybe two. Like, it's just crickets. Whereas if you ask them to turn to the person next to them and have a conversation about the content you've just shared, it'll be a roar of conversation, because it's easier, or break people up into groups of 3 or 4 or in their tables. Like we see this all the time in, conferences, presentations.
yeah.
So small group conversation, one-on-one conversation is the easiest conversation to have.
And that's true. You can tell a lot about the culture of a company and how much they practice psychological safety in its real in real life by when you are facilitating, when you do put out a question, and whether you get crickets or conversation. Because I was facilitating the other day at a small organisation. It was only a 50-person organisation, and there were about 20 of them in the room. And they were fantastic at giving, like, when I asked a question, and so much so that we couldn't fit all the content that was supposed to be filled in the hour because there was so much conversation along the way. And that was a real, real kudos to that company, because that really was a great reflection on the culture.
Yep.
Right. In most circumstances, people are like, but I don't want to say it. Who you go for? Like it's hard to get it's a lot harder. You have to be very creative to get the engagement.
I reckon the other thing at an organizational level that sort of indicates are they succeeding when it comes to psychological safety is how, and I know this sort of challenges the whole strengths-based notion, but how often do they discuss problems, challenges, issues, and have the positive ideological conflict, and I'm quoting Patrick Lencioni there in his work. The positive ideological conflict is the robust conversation where we can respectfully disagree with each other about something, and then chuck it in the washing machine or the tumbler and round it out, enable it to round out, because I think that's where ultimately why psychological safety exists. Can we create an environment where people feel like they can speak up and challenge something, not just go with the collective or the group or the leader in the worst case scenario, and get a better outcome that's more innovative, creative, and focused on continuous improvement?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's hard for a lot of people, both in professional and organizational lives, but also in personal lives. We often don't want to, most people like to avoid conflict. We're not taught how to navigate conflict.
Nope. No, we aren't. And it's usually because we fear what we don't know. And if we're not practicing conflict, we make assumptions about what's going to happen. And then it reinforces, if we don't go there and we don't have the conversation or we don't have the conflict, it reinforces the reason why we don't. So our brains just do a skip and a hop and go, oh, yeah, it's good. I avoided it and I don't need to go to see because it's all fine. It just blew over and they forgot about it. And personal relationship, we had an argument, we didn't address it, and now we're back to good again.
Yeah, and that feels better.
6 months later, blow up, oh, here we go again. And then 6 years later, why do we always argue about this same issue? Yeah. Oh, you always say that, I always say this. And then it makes you right. Yeah, see, I knew you were going to say that. And so the conflict is predictable. But actually, we've never really addressed it. We've never actually explored what's on the other side of it, which is the really deep fear of we may not be right for each other. Yes. This too may conclude with this was a mistake. Yeah. And that's everyone's deepest fear, because then they'll have to unravel that incredibly complicated and annoying ball of string, and they don't want to do it carefully. They just want to cut it off, But, as an avid fisherman, I know that braid that you paid for, it's bloody expensive. So you do want to give it a good crack and try and disentangle it, because ultimately, if you've got a fish on the end of it, you want to be able to pull it in. So.
Love it. Love the analogy. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's so complex, isn't it? The little art of conversation, open, honest conversation. It sounds so simple, but it is so nuanced and so complex. And yet, if we can master that, it's almost like we master connection, and connection is the medicine of life.
It really is. Yeah, that's all we really want. Some call it love. Some call it intimacy, some call it friendship, but I think it is connection. Yeah. That's what we're talking about here, and we want to feel connected.
Absolutely. So I want to delve a little bit into some of your story because you do share quite openly a lot of your childhood and a lot of your challenges in order
Mm,
to have open and honest conversation, and how you masked yourself through
mm,
your childhood in your conversations with your parents, in your conversations with your peers.
yeah,
And yet
yeah,
now, all these years later, you're teaching honesty and truth and how important it is to speak honestly. Whereas you,
mm,
for your whole childhood, um, masking yourself. And I think
mm,
modeled on, you can share maybe about your dad being a clown and that being the ultimate mask,
mm,
and watching how that was a real zapper of energy,
yeah,
when you had to perform that alter ego. But, that's
mm,
what you were taught in a lot of ways. And then you have
mm,
a lot of fear around your situation. So, yeah, it's such an intriguing story. So I would
mm,
love for you to just share a little bit about your story and
mm,
your masking experiences.
yeah. So, so I guess the backdrop for the story and the sharing of my personal story wasn't just to write an autobiography and get my memoirs out there. It was more of a demonstration of this concept of self-discovery through self-disclosure. And by that, I mean, when we make a conscious decision about what we want to share with the world, and the stuff that I haven't shared and I probably wouldn't, because it's not necessarily relevant, nor and maybe I'll change. And in the future, I go, yeah, actually, I want to share that component or that element. But that decision-making process that I went through and that I encourage everyone to go through is the magic, because it enables you to set some clear boundaries with yourself around, okay, what is it right now that I'm feeling uncomfortable about? What is it? Because for some, it's like, oh, that's nothing, oh, whatever, okay, you had a challenge when you were 12 or whatever. Yeah, that's easy. Oh, but this other thing, I could never share that. So we've all got our own limit and our own take on what's okay to share and what's not. I used uh, myself as an example to hone in on the point of, it's about the decision making around what you choose to share, not exactly what you share, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the process is more important than the outcome. In another way, simply put. So in terms of my story, yeah, I had a pretty challenging upbringing. When I was 12, I started acting out. I started hanging out with let's say kids that were probably a bit troubled, delinquent type behavior. I thought it was fun, exciting. Went down a bad path. There were drugs involved, stealing, all that sort of stuff. And I knew it was not good. I knew it was naughty or bad, and there was something that drew me in. It was exciting. It was stimulating. It was. I thought it was cool until it wasn't. And that was the sort of turning point for me. It was like, oh, okay, that got a bit too intense. Oh well, at least I've got my family and I've got my parents and whatnot. Well, of course, I wasn't telling anyone about this at that age, at 12. I wasn't being open. I wasn't seeing a psychologist or a counselor. I wasn't talking to my sisters. And so although my behavior had changed, I wasn't being open about it. So my mum interpreted that behavior change as me needing my father. Now, yes, maybe there was an element of truth in that. Who knows? It certainly wasn't what I was thinking. And so when she had the conversation with me and said, oh, I think you need your father, I went, yes. And I was like, thank God, now I can get away from the shame that I'm feeling when I walk into Kmart and experience, the glares from the shopkeepers because I got caught stealing there last week. And I won't have to explain my behavior to anyone now. So I saw it as an avenue to escape. The old adage of the grass looks greener on the other side till you get over there and realize it's all brown and deathly. And so, meanwhile, and I probably don't go into as much detail about this in the book, but meanwhile, my mum had the conversation with my dad and they were separated. And he was a fruit picker in rural town in New South Wales, right on the border near Queensland. And he lived in a caravan and he didn't have any money really. Fruit picking didn't pay amazingly well, so he was living on the poverty line. By taking on responsibility of a child, he would receive the sole parent pension. And so in his mind, he was thinking, cha-ching, now I've got an income. Right? Of course, he didn't say that to me. I figured all this out later. So there was this dishonesty. So the conversations we were having, I'm here thinking, thank God I can get out of this shame and shit that I'm feeling. And no one needs to know. And it's great. I can just sweep it under the rug and make a new life for myself. Dad was saying to me, oh, mate, this is going to be brilliant. We're going to have this great house and we're going to live like kings and it's going to be amazing. And, really sold me the dream. And I was like, oh, even better. Meanwhile, he was thinking, oh, good. I've got an income now. I just need to make sure I don't stuff it up. And so when we actually connected and I was living with him, it was not in good conditions. And I do describe that a little bit in the book. And there was in my mind, because I couldn't go back to shame, I'd created this, no, I have to battle it out. I have to push through. And that was the belief that I held that prevented me from being honest about what I was going through. Now, I could have been honest with my dad and said, mate, this sucks. I hate what I'm feeling right now. And actually, I only ever came to live with you because I wanted to escape my past. So it's not, I don't need you. I don't think you're going to give me some sort of guidance for my future. And there's a whole bunch of other reasons in the book why, that makes sense, why that wasn't what I was looking for from him. And he probably didn't have the capacity to do so. So yeah, that dishonesty and those lies. And then, 12 years old, you can probably say, well, yeah, you were young, so you made assumptions and yeah, you decided to tough it out. Well, there's people that are a lot older and wiser that would make the same sort of decision. But it was all off the back of being dishonest with myself about what was really going on and avoiding having the difficult conversation. And so I think why I'm so drawn to help people have that conversation is I keep seeing myself in the conversations. So people bring their challenges to me, all the successes as well. And underneath all of that is this really complicated, entanglement of dishonesty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I sort of I recognize it.
Mm.
I recognize it, and the easiest way to blur it out is drugs, and socially acceptable drugs are even worse.
Okay.
Because and people go, that's not a drug, that's alcohol. It's drugs and alcohol for a reason. It's like, well, alcohol, yeah, it's a drug. It's a depressant. It pushes things down. And so I think anything that prevents us from feeling and investigating and exploring what's truly going on for us is a truth killer. So yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing all of that. And I know that I'm sure that most of you had a huge amount of healing when you did the writing of the book. And
Mm.
so now talking about it might feel a little bit easier, but it's
Mm.
still, I'm no doubt that each time you talk about it, it also
Mm.
brings its array of emotions for you as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah.
thanks for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's interesting because you said how you saw it almost like a free pass to avoid shame by going to your dad's.
Mm.
And in the end, what you got was more shame in being able to go back when things weren't great,
Yeah.
because there was now double the amount of shame, because now I'm too, like, your ego was there too
Yeah.
much to go,
Yeah.
well, that didn't work for me, and now how do I go back, and so there's this shame around that. So
Mm.
isn't it interesting how you left to
Yeah.
avoid shame and then you just got handed a double platter of it?
Oh man. I mean, it's yeah. Uh, when I did finally go back to that hometown, and I went back to the high school where all of the same kids were that had stayed at the same primary school and high school and done what most people do.
Mm.
Oh yeah, that was painful. God, that was a hard year. Yeah, I did year 12 at that school. I'd changed schools multiple times and then went back. And it was just like, it was like they were in a time bubble. I mean, of course, they'd all grown and gone through puberty, but they hadn't really changed. I recognized them. None of them recognized me as
Mm.
a person. I had just been through something that completely morphed me, but not in a good way.
And so what do you think it was that enabled you to get through that? Because here you were, a person that had become
Mm.
such a master of disguise,
Mm.
and you made decisions to avoid shame,
Mm.
and yet you're now in your biggest challenge of all, and that's being in an environment with a
Mm.
whole lot of people when you're feeling the most amount of shame.
Yeah.
So how did you rise above that and end up finishing year 12, going to university, and now
Mm.
having an extremely successful career?
Yeah. So, um, art is my first answer, but deeper to that, it was more than art. It was expression. So I think what enabled me to process it, and it may not have even been on a conscious level, if I be completely honest, was was being able to express whatever was going on for me through, I did spray can art. I didn't do tagging and that sort of graffiti, but I did murals and whatnot. So that big art, and to me, abstract expressionism, surrealism was my genre. So it was a direct feed into whatever bizarreness was going on for me. And so if there was sorrow, or if there was passion, or if there was intensity, that was just expressed. So I did 2-unit art, I did 3-unit art, I did drama, and avoided pretty much everything else except biology, because I liked science and always had a thing about science, and I was always fascinated by the brain. So that stayed, and that ironically was my best subject. And art I did okay in, but it doesn't scale well. So unless you're like top, and everyone else in your school, and you come from an arty school, which I didn't, then it's sort of mediocre. It scales mediocre, not like the maths and sciences. So yeah, but that's what got me through. Yeah, I'm a strong believer that that's what got me through.
Yeah.
I still think the most powerful form of intelligence is creative expression.
Yeah.
Honestly believe that.
And that can be in conversation too.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. So you talk about something on which I want to read, on being the victim,
Mm.
because you just shared you could easily have just stayed in that victim mentality.
Mm.
And you shared something interesting here. I didn't, don't have my glasses next to me, so
Mm.
bear
Mm.
with me.
Yeah.
Make mistakes here. But you shared there is something safe about having a challenging upbringing filled with adversity and turmoil. Nobody expects much of you, so you never fail in life. Your parents already did that for you. You've got a free ticket to giving up because it wasn't your fault. If you ever fail, stumble, or suffer disappointment, there's an easy out. This pattern engulfed my sisters and me.
Yeah.
I think
It's
that's really powerful, and it's so true. There is something that is so beneficial about being the victim that keeps people in that mode.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting that you chose that particular phrase, because when my sisters, because obviously out of respect, I had them sort of included in the book, and there was stuff written in there that they could have been very upset about. So I wanted them to read it and at least have awareness. That particular statement, both of them got really challenged by it, in a good and disturbed sort of way, because they 100% knew exactly what I was talking about. And so that idea that and interestingly, the outcome is like, even though we've all done quite different things, there's a really similar pattern in all of us, and that is this never give up, like just grind, sometimes in a a dysfunctional way, where it's like, yeah, maybe that's not serving anyone now. Maybe you should actually step back and reevaluate and have an honest conversation with yourself. So we've all done that, quite extensively. And it could be personality. I think the environment and the dynamic of the environment, because my sisters had very different experiences to me. I didn't really talk much about their experience early on, but yeah, they had all sorts of shenanigans going on. They toured around Australia in a bus and a puppet show. Like, that is,
Oh, wow.
that was before my years. So there's plenty of photos, and there's a whole another story behind that one. And so they've got a very different experience. And
just to let everybody know, because if you haven't read the book, you didn't make it that clear that your dad was a performer and a clown.
Yeah. He was quite he I don't know if anyone, maybe some of the wiser members of your audience will recognize or remember the Keep Australia Beautiful campaign. And it was kicked off in Victoria. That would have been back in 70s. I'm going to say the 70s, maybe mid 70s. Dates are a little bit shaky, but he toured around Australia, promoting Clean Up Australia Day and the Keep Australia Beautiful campaign. Like that was where it all sort of started. So he had this sort of environmental angle, but he was this bizarre clown, and the reason why he gained popularity and he had TV appearances and stuff was because he was quite, the character he adopted was quite inappropriate. He would it was funny, and so people, like, he was likable and he could take the piss out of prominent figures, like the premier and stuff like that, and it'd be funny and okay. So the comedy sort of I think just lightened the message and drew people in. And so he was a brilliant performer. He was fantastic to watch, and he was a musician, and it was just very entertaining.
Yeah. And that's inspiring. I think that when you're around that creative expression, like you talked about before, how powerful creative expression is, and when you're around it, it can be really inspiring.
Oh yeah.
Often what sits underneath it is, if the person hasn't had those honest conversations with themselves and that they continue to wear the mask that they're wearing when they're performing, it can also be really damaging for those around them.
Yeah. So Dad was he was an incredibly antisocial and withdrawn individual in just him, like as his person. His character, Abe, was the clown name, was this over the top, intense, larger than life character. So it was his alter ego, and it was his way of being seen and heard in the world, because his natural person was quite intelligent. He was quite a big reader and a thinker, but he was very misunderstood, and quite. And look, he had an incredibly challenging upbringing. I didn't talk much about that in the book, but he had shared quite a lot with me, and his brothers shared quite a lot with me, and I've seen case files on him, like psychiatric reports and whatnot, and he had a really, really challenging upbringing, which I didn't find out till later, like when I was an adult, and it all sort of made sense. So, he had a lot of pain that he hadn't necessarily worked through. Lost his father very early in life, and had a stepfather who was, probably not the greatest man to have around. And so there was a lot of dishonesty that was being role modeled for him. And so he just did the best that he could. And, it was quite amazing that how he chose to express some of that dysfunction emerged as this clown character. It was just quite, amazing and brilliant. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's often common, isn't it? That's the archetype of the clown,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's going on underneath that isn't necessarily explored. So if we move on from that, but sort of stay with that idea a little bit, you talk about, when you talk about sort of the self-awareness stuff and you talk about life success, you talk about there being three important components. One being knowing your purpose, one having the strength and aligning with your strengths, knowing your character strengths and being able to put them into play. But then you talk about the third, which is managing your emotions. And you say that if you can't manage your emotions, but even regardless of how aligned you are with your purpose and how well you know and put into play your strengths, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how your emotions hijacked your ability to think and reason and resulted in all of the guilt and regret and anxiety and anger and helplessness that you talk about.
Yeah. So, I mean, it still happens, by the way. There are many moments where I get emotionally hijacked, and my brain turns into some sort of reptile, and I don't know what planet I'm on, but that's all of us. Road rage would be a good example for some of us. I don't tend to experience road rage. I've worked that one through, but there are definitely triggers that I have, and yes, usually it's in the form of where people say things in a team session or whatnot that I just think that is ridiculously inappropriate. And it's, funnily enough, for me, it's usually in a group of men, and it's something about women, and it's derogatory or it's horrible. That's where I just think, what? Who is this person? And I just think, do they even still exist in a day like today? Like, how? And they're successful and they're well, and I just think, what have you even watched the news in the last 27 years? Because it never ceases to amaze me. But anyway, it's anyway, it's shocking.
It is an interesting one, and I think that everybody would be able. The reason I asked that and mentioned it was because I think that everybody has some often some difficulty and gets themselves, I suppose, away from their initial intention or their goals because they can't manage their emotions.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's a lot of talk these days with neurodiversity and how neurodiverse people really struggle with that. But in general, I think regardless of that, I think a lot of people struggle with it. So what would be one tip or tool that you would share to help people in situations manage their emotions?
Yeah. Look, the hardest, so a couple of things. I think the greatest tool is when you're not experiencing emotional hijack, consider what's most important to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about this in the book in terms of purpose and chapter 8. And, go deep into your purpose, your values, what is most important to you,
Yeah,
because that is your anchor.
which is what we
Yeah.
talked about right in the beginning about
Yeah.
really doing the work to work out what your values are.
Correct. You understand when you're hijacked, or you're in the pit of despair, or you're angry and you don't know why, or everything just falls apart in your life, and you want to spit acid. They're the moments when you recognize why you did the work. Now, if you haven't had those moments in your life, then you're either not human, or you're 2 years old,
Or you're
or you're
hibernating.
lying, or you're lying to yourself,
Yeah.
is the other one, most likely. Yeah, and apologies if that's confrontational. At some point, you recognize what I mean by that. Yeah. So doing that work outside of being emotional, it's like, let's use this as an analogy. I want to exercise tomorrow morning at 5:30 in the morning. I'm not going to wait until 5:30 to get all my stuff ready and decide what color socks I'm going to wear. I prepare that all the night before, put it in my gym bag. So at 5:30, all I need to do is get up, because I know I'm probably going to feel a bit crappy and it's going to be cold and I don't want to go outside, and I couldn't be asked. But when I get to the gym, I'm fine, and I pull my stuff out and it's all there ready to go. That is purpose in a nutshell. When I need it, it's all there ready for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm clear, I've done the work, and I can come back to it. The thing with people that are hijacked, whether they've been, labeled as anxious or PTSD or depressed or whatever other, DSM-4, DSM-5 category that, comes to mind, they're emotionally hijacked. Let's just call it that. Right? They're emotionally dysregulated. And if you ask them in that moment, oh, we need to get you emotionally regulated, they're just going to say, well, how? Well, I don't feel like it. I don't want to. That doesn't make sense to me. So if they've done the work for purpose first, we can bring them back to that. And it's a fast track to helping them challenge some of the irrationality that is engulfing them in that moment. And it also, it sort of reconnects them, because they're disconnected, right? They're feeling disconnected from themselves and the world. And, we talked about connection being the core of everything. So if they're feeling disconnected, they're not feeling good. We know this. So we reconnect them to themselves. And in doing so, it helps them connect with other people. So that's the deeper work and the reasoning behind why we focus on purpose. Because if suffering hasn't found you yet, it will.
Yeah. Yeah.
We all know it.
Yeah.
And it, most of the time, it's completely beyond your control.
Yeah. I think when you sort of shared that example, it's sort of, if I relate it to, say, the whole even health and well-being idea of focusing on prevention. So setting yourself up for success, like
totally.
rather than, most of the diseases now, and not all of them, there's definitely a number of factors at play. I won't say anything that is going to get my head bitten off, but
by
the wrong people. But in general, our lifestyle plays a big role in our health. And
100%.
To put the resources into better machines and better hospitals and better equipment and better diagnostic tools is great. But how about if we put the resources into not having to use those things?
Yeah. Because people say, why am I doing all of this? Why am I having to have these really challenging, awkward, hard conversations, or in healthcare, why am I doing all this proactive physiotherapy when I feel great? it's really hard to justify pain when it doesn't exist in the absence of you creating it for yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, why would you do that? But we all know if we want to get fit, you've actually, like, you get big muscles or strong muscles, you've actually got to work them.
If you want to run a marathon, you have to do the work before, even not just
no one likes it.
Yeah. I mean, so so when we relate that to our emotions, it's the same as, if you don't do the personal development work and the self-awareness and know your values and know your intention and your purpose and character strengths and all of that together, then even when you're feeling fantastic, if you don't do that work while you're feeling fantastic, very, very hard to integrate it and put into practice and manage your emotions when you're in a triggered situation.
Yeah. So look, that's the big one, but I know that's not helpful for people that are potentially feeling in that pit of despair right now. Yeah. So if they're in that pit of despair, the first thing is, have you gone and seen a professional? Have you actually sought an objective opinion about what you're experiencing? Because that conversation in and of itself, even though it might feel like, oh, I don't want to say that I've got a mental health problem, or I don't want to be labeled, or I don't do drugs, so I don't want to take medication. I'd say, let your ego sort of sit down for a bit and forget the prejudgment. Maybe you need help, and so allow yourself to be medicated if need be. I'll use the example of, I injured my back a couple of years ago now, just before COVID, actually, really badly. Like, I did a disc injury, and it laid me out like for 2 months. I couldn't really walk, and I was feeling the psychological impact of that as well. I couldn't really run my practice. I was suffering, and it was just annoying, like, to not be able to go to the kitchen from the lounge room without stopping 5 times. I couldn't even walk around the block. Like, it was horrible, absolutely horrible. I didn't want to take medication. I didn't want to take Voltaren. I didn't want to take Panadol. I didn't want to take Valium, because I was like, no, it's all bad. The second that I let go of that it's bad, and I alleviated the horrible pain that I was experiencing and the inflammation that I was experiencing in my sciatic nerve and the disc, I started to feel better. I started to improve, and it enabled my body to repair. Yeah. So sometimes if it's that acute, and you see this with panic attacks, and when somebody's having a psychotic episode, like, that is acute. That is so acute that they need some form of pretty drastic intervention in order to come back to normal. So I'd say, have you sought help? Have you had an objective opinion, or a couple outside of your mum or your friend or your best mate or whatever? Because sometimes, yes, that's good to have a conversation, but well-meaning advice should not replace professional expert opinion and the knowledge to be able to give you what you need in that moment. So that would be another one. Aside from that, some basic techniques like naming the emotion. So sometimes if you just like, if you're feeling hijacked, it just sort of turns messy, and it's like you've got this big black fog in your brain, and it's just, everything's crazy. If you step back and you articulate to yourself exactly what it is that you're feeling. Are you feeling anger? Are you feeling sadness? Are you feeling anxiety? Whatever it is that you're feeling, like, it by stepping back and naming it enables you to sort of divorce yourself from it in that moment. And in that moment, you start to get a bit clearer. So that can be a helpful activity as well. And if you don't know how to, like, sometimes if the answer is, I don't know, and it's just sort of blocking, look at some emotion wheels, and, there's heaps of them on Google. You can just type in emotion wheel or list of emotions, and you can sort of pinpoint what's happening for you, and that can be really helpful as well, because it's like, okay, right, and where is this coming from, and what's the genesis of this feeling, and help you sort of get a bit clear.
Great advice. And I think just even in a more simplistic way, even in those moments, sometimes those things are really hard. But in those
Mm,
moments, even if you have something in place that you become self-aware enough that you can feel the emotion coming on,
mm,
and you literally change the environment. You walk out of the
yeah,
space,
yeah,
you go and get a drink of water, you
yeah,
just pause, just hit the pause button.
yeah, yeah. I think that's also a great technique. Um, there's plenty of Amy Cuddy's research around posture, and just changing your posture enables you to change your emotion. So there's not too many depressed people that I've worked with that have an upright, confident posture.
Yeah.
It just doesn't go hand in hand, and vice versa. If somebody's got an upright, confident posture, it's hard to be downcast and feeling sorry for yourself and feeling like a victim.
Absolutely.
So
Body language, open chest,
yeah,
rather than contracted,
that's
and
it.
even just a smile
Yeah,
changes
yeah.
your physiology. There's so
It
much
it
research
it
behind it.
does heaps of research, and it doesn't take long. So it's a really quick
Yeah.
and effective technique. So that's good. I mean, obviously breathing, it's the first and last thing we ever do in life. So you'd think we'd get better at it, but really, one of the issues that most people are feeling when they're emotionally hijacked is they're out of control. I don't know what to do. Right? That would be a common phrase that many people say. Well, the one thing you can always control that you don't need any special equipment for is your breath. So bring it back to your breath. And if it's like, oh, I hate those box breathing techniques, and oh, I forgot how to do it. Most smartwatches, and I've got a smartwatch, just these things are so clever these days. They tell you when to breathe. They buzz, breathe in, they buzz, hold it, they buzz, breathe out. And for 15 minutes, you can do a breathing activity, and then it'll tell you whether you've reduced your stress levels. And it's actually really effective. And I use it quite often just for that, because I'm like, you know what? I don't want to have to count, or, because sometimes you get lost in your thought, or you don't, or you think you've been doing it for 15 minutes. It's been like 2. And so it's like, oh, okay, I'll just set it. Off we go, and it's really good. So just bringing it back to your breath, I think, is a really powerful technique. And then, of course, exercise and yoga, and there's so many millions of things that you can do. I do karate a couple of times a week. That's a good one too. Just you've got to find what works for you.
And juggling is, of course, your number one.
Of
Um,
course, I try not to say it too much, because it's not for everyone. And
yeah,
some people actually get triggered. Their anxiety is triggered because it's a reinforcer that they can't do something.
yeah.
But there's plenty of research that indicates that it does reduce anxiety and depression as well, because it gives you something to focus on that takes you away from rumination.
Yeah. Wow, we've covered so much, and there is so much more that we could even cover with just a simple conversation about conversations.
Yes, indeed.
And there's more that I have on my notes that I would like to talk about, but I'm very aware of the length of the episode
Yeah,
and people's ability to listen for particular amounts of time.
yeah,
I do want to bring one more thing into
mm,
attention. We don't need to have a big talk about it, but I just want to say that um, that there is different cultural differences and societal
mm,
norms around that will impact the ability for open and honest conversations, and
yes,
that it's really important to also be aware
mm,
of those cultural differences when
mm,
approaching your conversations. But I think that if you can come back to,
mm,
are you being honest with yourself, and go
yeah.
back to yourself first, then often it's not really it doesn't end up being much of a problem because the intention is really pure and clean.
Correct. And you know what? Having worked with cultures in China and Thailand and Japan and across Asia, absolutely, there's really clear cultural differences. But as you get to work more closely with them, there's there's unspoken rules around what things mean in those cultures. So while they're not overtly saying them, there's a subtlety around it that, even though they've said, yes, sir, that actually meant no, not at all. And everyone else heard it, but the person that's culturally insensitive didn't. So once you spend enough time, like, it's just knowing the language, right? So you've got to learn the language before you know how to be honest. And if they were being honest, you just didn't hear the message. So yeah, it's fascinating. But I think, yes, you're right. Can bring it back to, am I being honest with myself as the real starting point? I think that's where it starts and it ends.
Mm. Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your personal stories and your insights, your knowledge on this topic. And yeah, I think we could probably talk for another hour on it.
And
But
that's a sign of a good conversation if it flows.
yeah, exactly. So there's been really good flow in this conversation. So hopefully, apart from the content and the words that we've spoken, we have provided a good example of a good, honest conversation. And to be transparent with you all, I've only ever met Joe once, and it was briefly at a conference, the Gathering of Kindness conference that was targeted for medical professionals. And Joe was a speaker, and I went along as an attendee, and we had a brief conversation, or, not totally brief, but probably, half-hour conversation at the end of the event. And that was last year. So we haven't spoken since then. So it's not like we are good buddies that are used to having conversations with each other. But I suppose we are two people that love good conversation and are passionate about being on the road to being expert conversationalists.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I've had great fun. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So we would love to know what your biggest insights are from today's conversation. If you could leave a comment wherever you're listening to this and let us know, or jump onto either of our socials and share a comment or reach out through private messaging. If you have enjoyed the episode, please do share it with your network and consider subscribing to Wellthy Living Podcast wherever you listen to your podcast, but also on YouTube. To find out a bit more about my services, you can visit my website at wellthyliving.com.au or connect with me on any of my social media channels. To find out a little bit more about Joe and his wonderful book, True Perspective, you can visit his website. Go for it, Joe.
joehart.com.au, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Insta, Twitter, or Facebook.
Fantastic. So until next time, remember, connection is medicine.